kind of interesting. Bitcoin broke out above the 200 period, broke this decelerating trend line, going back and testing the January low, the S&P doing the same thing, testing the January low. Now the risk is that the S&P does what Bitcoin did, and that is that it came up to the RSI, the midpoint of the RSI, and then turned back down and got a divergence right here. That's the risk for the S&P. Now Bitcoin had just had an intraday push, the first push down below the 200 period. The second push with the divergence went to key support and formed a divergence while closing below the 200 period. Now we're back above it, breaking the trend line, testing the horizontal resistance. The S&P, if Bitcoin can continue, the S&P can follow Bitcoin. I did a Bitcoin video today. I'll link it at the end of this video if you want to go watch that. All kinds of new bullish signals on Bitcoin. Same thing here. We're coming back up to the January low right here on the S&P 500. That's the low right here. We come right back up to it, and our 200 period, we closed above it. Now we gapped higher. You always want to watch a gap. Is it a gap and go, where you gap and you just keep going, or is it a gap and fill? And a gap and go is like this, where you gap and you just keep going. Is it a gap and fill, or is it a gap and trap, where prices gap higher and then begin to move in the other direction? Again, I think that these are the two most likely scenarios. Now, again, we were told this rally today was never supposed to happen. We were told it wasn't going. The bears told us no way. We're going to get the tariffs on April 2nd, over the next week and a half, and the market's just going to collapse. The market is likely in a bottoming process, and it may have already bottomed, as I've said. Bottoming signals, momentum turned, and now, again, we can get above the 200 and stay above it. You're going to see all kinds of trend signals begin to turn, and we've started to see some signs of that today. This big rally that we had. Thing is, we could still do what Bitcoin is. We don't have to do that. We don't have to form a divergence. Okay, there are many times that we don't, but you could end up. We had a little tiny one, by the way. We had a little tiny divergence right there with the RSI, with these lows right here. But could we end up doing what Bitcoin did and go roll back over and end up seeing a divergence on the RSI and the awesome oscillator and come back down here? And that could happen. Trump could come out. Now today we got good tariff news. I told you it was coming. But Trump could come out, and say tariffs, and Wall Street goes, running scared. The tariffs are coming. Again, how do we know that? How do we know they're not going to get delayed? I keep saying it. Now, again, you could get a divergence on the MACD. It got a bullish cross there on Friday. And again, you could still end up saying, but you don't have to. We may not. It may be we're just bottoming out. We're going to go if we can get above the 200 here and stay above it. We did close above the 200 period moving average. So we'll be watching. Does the RSI push above 50 and then stay above that level? Does the S&P get above the 200, stay above that level, and start moving back to the 50 period moving average? I keep talking about this. We'll see. Do we fill the gap and then keep going, or do we get a gap and go and keep going again, or do we come back and we try to take out this low? And if we do, we'll undercut it just a little bit and likely bottom. Again, the herd got extremely bearish down here, so we're likely in a bottoming process. The bears want us no way. When we get the rally, then the bears are going to tell us it's a counter trend. It's a counter trend. The rally that they're telling us isn't going to happen. When it does happen, they'll start telling us it's a counter trend. I think we're going to move to new highs. Again, I think you've got a bottom that has carved out here or about to carve out. I got the blue count here that if we get an ABC right here, and this is 4, then we get one more push down for 5, and then that could be surrounding the April 2nd date. Or, again, if the bottom's in, we could just go. I've got the black count here for 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and now we're starting this new push higher. And we've already completed the 5, completed wave C, this whole thing being an A, a B, and a C, where it finishes over here at the blue count, completing intermediate wave 4. Again, I believe this is corrective. I told you I was expecting a 20% drop once the market peaks. I do not believe this is it. I told you that we'll have that 20% drop to kick off the bear market. I don't believe this is it. I think we're going to new highs on the S&P 500. And again, historically, I went over in the weekend video. Historically, that's what has happened. You get this, here we've dropped 10.5%. I told you maybe we dropped closer to 12% like we did in 2007. 2000, it was 10.40%. Maybe we've reached that with the 10.5%, and then we get this rally to new highs. And again, I think you can rally, 15, 17, 20%. My guess is it's going to be closer to 17 to 20%, and I think you're going to come up here, and I think you're going to reach a new all-time high and hit the upper channel line as I've talked about. Now, please support the channel. Please support the channel with the link directly below that allows me to be able to provide you this information. If you like the charts, you like the indicators, please let me know that by supporting the channel today. It's a lot of time and effort to do this, so if you could take a moment to do that and partner with me, I would really, really appreciate it. I don't have any sponsors. I turn those offers down. I just ask that you do what you can to help out. So if you could take a moment to do that, I would really, really appreciate it. Bitcoin's breaking a trend line. If we look at this trend line with our linear scaling, it's a better trend line than on the log scaling. And again, when if we go back test the trend line and fill this gap? Certainly possible. If we get rejection at the 200, if we just get a follow through, again, I'll be watching the 50 period moving average and the cloud up here. And if so, if we get a follow through, can the RSI get it above 50 and stay above 50? So just a trend line I'm paying attention to here. The VIX was down 9.34% today. It lost the 50-period moving average today. If it could stay below it, that's going to be good for the S&P. If we end up pushing back up, then the S&P is at risk of, again, filling the gap for a higher low or going back and testing the lows, stalling at the 200-period moving average. The VIX, when it stays below the 50-period moving average, good things happen on the S&P. When you are above the 50 period, as we got above it over here, then bad things start happening on the S&P 500. So again, we're dropping below it. We'll see what happens. Here's the 200 directly below there. We'll be watching the VIX closely. And again, now becoming oversold. So we'll be watching what happens. Do we stall at the 200 and pull back and try to fill the gap and maybe back test, or go down and test a low? Possibility is we clear this level and get a follow-through move and start moving towards the 50-period moving average in a powerful move. This week we have consumer confidence on Tuesday. We have new home sales, durable goods on Wednesday, second revision of GDP on Thursday, pending home sales, a bunch of Fed speakers all week. And then Friday, we got the PCE inflation data. Now, we saw that GDP now number, the Atlanta Fed estimate for GDP. Again, it's not as bad. It's now at negative 1.8%. We recently saw that revised to be better. It was at negative 0.28%. And again, remember, this is something that's been rattling the market. And I told you it could change until we see the final print. We will close out the quarter, but then we won't get this number until the end of April. Even if it's a negative number, the market might shrug it off because the next quarter could be a positive number. Something I'm continuing to monitor, but right now it's negative 0.18%, an improvement, still a negative, but still a negative number. That was last week's revision. So we're going to continue to monitor this. Now, we had the NASDAQ 100 up 2.16% today, up 428 points. Again, we came back. We filled the election gap over here. Well, that's what Bitcoin just did with Bitcoin futures. It came back, filled the election gap. We filled the Fed pivot gap back over here from back in September. And now, again, we're gapping higher. We're getting above the 10. We're going, the 10's still below the 20, but we're coming up here to the 200. Now, S&P closed above the 200. NASDAQ didn't. And do we just have a gap and go, or do we come back and we fill the gap, or do we test this low? So we'll be watching. Again, we had a failed breakout up here on the NASDAQ. Risk is that we end up forming a divergence on the RSI, and we come back down and we take this level out, back to test the September low, and the 400 period becoming closer to those levels, just undercutting this level just a little bit. So we'll be watching to see what happens. But if we have bottomed, you got to get above that 200 period and then stay above the 200. Again, we're going to be watching the 50, and we're going to be watching the cloud of resistance on our 100 period up there at the 50. The 50 is just crossing below it, same as the S&P 500. Again, we've had our MACD bullish cross. We're now getting this rally, the 200 period. We'll see what happens. Do we stall like Bitcoin did or plow on through this level? Or is there more work to be done and we got to go back and get one more test of the lows and maybe take them out? The Elliott wave count on the S&P 500. Again, is it done here? Do we have, I'm looking for a 5-leg push down for an ABC move here. Again, for a 335 pattern, an expanded flat, you go just above the high over here from the starting point of wave A. Then you take out the low of wave A, and it's a 335 pattern. So I'm looking for a 5-leg push lower. Is that done here, or do we have the blue count and we end up undercutting the S&P low just a little bit, or is it done? We'll be watching today's gap, but again, get that 50 back above the 200, and then you got to get price back above the 200 in order for this to be done. It does look corrective to me. Whether it's done here or not remains to be seen. The black count may be it. The wave 4, intermediate wave 4, may be done with the ABC, or again, if this is a 3-leg push higher for wave 4, then again, we'll be looking for one more push down. We'll be watching to see how, and that would be pushing into April 2nd. If that did play out that way, or we could rally and get up to the 50 period in the daily time frame and then start seeing some volatility as we move closer to April 2nd certainty. Unless we have certainty by then, we'll be watching to see what happens with today's gap. Let's look at the 60-minute chart again. Gapping higher. We had this attempted push above this trend line and it kind of failed. We pushed back and we bounced off the 50. And now we're gapping higher and we're clearing this trend line. We've already cleared this trend line of the channel, the upper boundary of the channel. Our bullish diversions played out. Multiple points of bullish diversions. Told you, again, we could be headed towards the 200 period test, and that's where this horizontal resistance area is just above it. We're hitting the horizontal resistance. We're hitting, but we're closing above that 200 period, which again, I told you back on the 13th, the 12th and the 13th, that eventually we're going to head back to that 200 period moving average. The 13th was the day that we bottomed. The 12th was the day before the bottom, and I told you we were going to get this rally back up. Okay, we've had the rally back up. Now it's the waiting game. Do we go back and test the lows, or do we bust on through the 200 period moving average in the daily time frame? But here we've halted at that January low. Our 200 period is directly overhead here for the 60-minute chart. Eventually, we got to get the 50 back above the 200 here in the 60-minute time frame. This diversions play out, possibly confirming a higher low. Again, the MACD firming up at the center line there, still in positive territory, now moving to a new high. So again, could we try to hold above the 200 and start moving higher, maybe to the 200 here in the 60-minute time frame, hold above that 200 though in the daily time frame. We'll see how this unfolds. Risk is that we get one more push down for a flush out move. Like I said, it could be that we have now bottomed. Got to see more signals begin to turn back to bullish and eventually get the 50 back above the 200 period. So again, we've seen the bottoming signals, we've seen momentum signals start to turn back to bullish, and now we're starting to see some trend signals start to turn bullish, but we're not quite there yet. We had a big tariff rally on hope. Gee, who told you that was going to happen? Told you we could see the market begin to claw its way back up on hope. Hope of negotiations, hope of Trump walking back the tariffs. We already saw him do that. I've talked about this at great length and detail. We saw Trump do this with the Canadian and Mexico tariffs. He put them on, and then he said, well, everything covered under our previous trade agreement will not get the new tariffs. So most of the tariffs were walked back. The steel and aluminum tariffs now, we've got the China tariffs. But the bears told us, no, there's no way we're going to get the tariffs and the stock market's just going to collapse. And I told you, it's not going to happen that way. It's going to be hope. And now, what's the headline? Investors hope Trump softens tariff stance. Surprise, surprise. The bears told us no way we're going to rally. The bears told us no way we're going to rally. But yet, again, we know that we're at extreme fear and sentiment is at extreme bearish levels. We've likely got a bottom or a bottoming process with one more push down, one or the other. The Dow rallied nearly 600 points, up 598 points, up 1.42. The S&P up 1.76. It was up just over 100 points at 57.68, rounding up. The NASDAQ rose by 2.25%, just over 2.25%, up 400 points. The Russell, the best performer, up 52 points, up above 2100 again, and the VIX declined by 9.34%. The VIX back below 18, back below the 20 area. It's at 17.48. Again, what's the reason for the rally? The exact reason I told you. Hope, hope, hope. I keep talking about it. Some tariffs might be delayed. Other reports, they might not be as bad. Had another cabinet meeting. Trump's, I think it was his second cabinet meeting now. First one, he rattled the markets talking about tariffs. He had kind of mixed messages. So talked about, earlier talked about giving breaks. Again, sounding like he's walking back the tariffs, but then talked about in the cabinet meeting that he pledges the auto, pharma, and tariffs in the near future. And he had coupled with that the semiconductor. NBC has the in the headline here, sowing confusion. And it's unclear, tariffs be delayed? Will they be walked back a little bit? Again, the things that I keep telling you in every single video, told no possible way that's going to happen. And yet, here it is, it's happening. If we get the tariffs, we could see, again, countries begin to cave and Europe begin to come to the negotiating table, and that happened with Canada. But talks they started to move towards the negotiating table, and right now things are kind of on hold between the U.S. and Canada with the changing of leadership over there at the moment. So again, I think you're going to get this. Seen bottoming signals form. We got bottoming signals form, and now we're starting to see some of the red go away. Still more work to be done. We saw momentum begin to turn back to bullish, and now we're starting to see some trending signals start to show signs of life again. Not all of them. We have more work to be done, and we got to get a follow through and stay above the 200. But here we're getting green bars. We're back to green bars. So I told you we had these bottoming signals that formed. So again, it's possible the bottom is in. If we get rejection at the 200, end up with a gap and trap, you could still come down here. The bears are telling us we're about to fall off a cliff, and I don't think so. I think that we're in a bottoming process, and I think you got a good chance we've bottomed over here. And if Bitcoin can hold above the 200, then maybe the S&P tries to hold above it or fills a gap and tries to hold above it. Remember, when Bitcoin first moved up to the 200 period, it stalled there. And now it's clearing it. Does the S&P pull back? Well, Bitcoin maybe back test a breakout of the trend line and fill this gap. And we don't go back and we don't take out the lows. Bitcoin, it stalled around the 200 a little bit before trying to get the surge that we're getting above it today. See all of that in my Bitcoin video. I'll link it at the end of this video. But do we stall around the 200 period like Bitcoin did initially and pull back and then go higher and follow Bitcoin? Could be. See momentum go in positive territory. Well, we're not there yet with the S&P. Bitcoin went up and then pulled back, and then it got into positive territory. Do we see the same thing with the S&P? We'll be watching again. The S&P and NASDAQ are likely following Bitcoin, and then not that is the case. But we had the bottoming signals, and we saw the momentum line turn to bullish. Now we're starting to see some more bullish signals. You got the little arrow here, and you're getting above the 200 period, and right here. This line represents a swing move. It was red, and now it's turning back to neutral here. So again, we'll be watching to see what happens. Turning green, but it's kind of going sideways. So again, maybe that's a bullish sign in and of itself, but it's kind of going sideways at the moment. So again, we got to see that turn up. We got to see these signals begin to turn up. You busted above the cloud right here, and you got this buy signal today, busting up above the cloud. So again, we're starting to see some of the trend signals begin to show signs of life with the S&P. Now, maybe we pull back and fill the gap, and the signal remains still bullish, and then we continue on our way. Like Bitcoin, it back tested. It had a little bull flag on the 4-hour chart, and it back tested it, and then it cleared the 200 after trying to clear it once. It failed. Do we see the same thing with the S&P? We'll be watching. See all these signals in my Bitcoin video. I go through them. I don't have time to show you here. If you're interested, again, the Bitcoin video is linked at the end of this video. So bullish bottoming signals down here, then momentum changes. Now we're seeing some bullish signals with the cloud and so forth begin to change back to bullish. Here again, we're still red bars, but we're trying to flip back to get momentum back to bullish. Got to clear this area over here for the trend to flip. Starting to see some trend signals flip. Need to see more. Bearish at the top over here in the reversal after the failed breakout. And again, it's been bearish ever since. Now it's trying to flip a little bit. We'll see if there's more work to be done. But like I said, Bitcoin in first attempting to clear the 200, pull back at it. Do we see the S&P do the same thing? Intraday, again, we're getting some green going on here, but the bars are still red. Getting some, the line turning back to blue. That's positive. Is something sustainable like this downward move here or this downward move here? Is it a sustainable upward move, or is it just going to be short-lived like right here for a moment and we go back and we test the higher low here and the lower low, and we go back and maybe fill the gap or try to make a new low? We'll be watching to see how it goes, but you always want to watch a gap. Is it a gap and go? Is it a gap and fill? Or is it a gap and trap? Gap and go, you just keep going. You gap higher and you move in the direction of the gap and you just keep going. That would be a follow through. If we stop at 200, maybe you get a gap fill. Okay. If it's a gap and trap, then maybe you come back here and take out this low here and get it, undercut it. Ends up being the fifth wave. We'll be watching to see how this unfolds. But I'm just telling you, we have more bullish signals now happening as we've come up to that 200 period. And I told you we were going to go test the 200 period, just come underneath it or tag it. It's a waiting game. We'll have to see what happens surrounding the 200 period moving average. Still risk of a divergence, like right here. Look, we're seeing some green go on here, and some of the signals turn, not all of them, but you still have to clear this cloud right here for the trend. And again, got some green over here, and it marked it as a counter trend. We still ended up going lower. The risk is we get a divergence right here, and we end up going lower. Trump comes out tomorrow and says, just kidding, and the market moves into freakout mode. We'll see what happens. If you can stay above the 200 in the daily, that's positive. If you can't, that's not going to be a strong sign. It's going to suggest there's more work to be done, either filling this gap or going back down and testing the support zone. So we'll be watching to see how this unfolds. So is this the beginning of something that we build upon, or is this another fake out move and there's more work to be done and we go back and we end up filling the gap and then go on our way? And that's what Bitcoin did. There was more work to be done, and Bitcoin tried to get above that 200 and then it failed. So we'll be watching here, but we are seeing some green, but you have to have more things happen. You're getting green bars, you're getting momentum trying to flip here, but the trend here is still bearish. Got to get things turning back to green and this line turning back to blue, and we got to be able to clear this cloud area up here if this is the real deal, Don Steele. So do we see oscillators start going in positive territory, or do we come back down and start seeing divergences develop? S&P intraday here. Now quickly, when we got above the 200 period in 2007, we got above it. Well, we pushed above it some more, and then we pulled back and dropped below it. We'll see if we get something like this where we can try to move closer to that 50 period moving average. And again, I talked about the divergence on parameter developing. Had a couple of tests dropping back below it. Bitcoin tried to get above it and it dropped back below it. We'll see what happens. We'll be watching today's gap closely as well. It was the 2007 top when we dropped below the 200. Here, again, we had that 10.40%. We just dropped 10.5%. Here, when we got above the 200, well, we kept soaring above it, straight up to that 50, and then pulled back. And again, volatility back to the 200. So again, can continue to clear the 200 period moving average and get a follow through, then maybe you see something like that. But it is still possible that we do what Bitcoin did and get rejection at the 200, go back, fill the gap, and then try to go. Third scenario is that we get, again, a final flush out move, undercut the previous low from March 13th, and then try to bottom there. So we're going to be watching which way it plays out. But again, regardless which way it plays out, I think we're going higher. Again, I think we're going to see something like this where we get this big surge. This was 17%, as I mentioned, in less than a month. The S&P weekly is going to confirm the bottoming tail in all likelihood. And again, if you do, then we're going to move to try to back test the trend line, the broken trend line here, and the 50, test the 50 week, or I'm sorry, the 50-day moving average bouncing off the 50-week moving average. And then again, I think you're going to see the RSI end up going back up and getting another reference point of inversions coming up into this channel line here. And again, if that is on hope, again, we could rally on into April, into May. The seasonality could kick in. We take our time reaching the trend line. It could go on into the summer, June, July, August. And a date's not my target. A number's not my target. The trend line's my target. If we reach it sooner, we'll be lower. If we reach it higher, and we fail to reach it over here, if we reach it at higher levels, if we take longer to reach it, then the S&P will be higher. But this could take us up towards 65, 6,600. We didn't reach it over here because we went nowhere for months. Then we get this sell-off, and now, again, I think you're going to resume the advance and get the final blow-off, the final phase of the blow-off top. S&P had this failed breakout. If we could continue the rally from here, we're getting back above the 20 as it's crossing the 200. We're getting back above the 200. If we could continue to here, I'll be watching the 50. And if we do what we did in 2001 and 2007, should we get above here, then again, we could come back to that 200 for a test and stall at the 100, the 50 period, the 100 is the pink line, and our cloud of resistance. And then everybody will say, oh, it's over, it's over, it's over. And then eventually coming up there. That's assuming we get a gap and go. The other scenarios, we do what Bitcoin did. We stall here. We come back to the gap fill, and we make another attempt to get above the 200 here after we dance around here. Or, again, get that final push down into April and then do it and undercut that level. Those are the scenarios that I think. But, again, the narrative on social media is that we're going to have this massive crash going into August or April 2nd, and I don't think so. So you're in a bottoming process. A failed breakout I talked about, and again, we're going 17 to 20% higher. If this low can hold right here, and then we'll be looking at our Fibonacci retracements that come up in this area as well. As we're bouncing off of our 50 period on the 60-minute chart here of the S&P, we bounced off the 50 period, bounced off the 50 period. Now, get our way towards the 200, but we're also above the cloud, the trending cloud. So if we try to fill the gap, here, you could end up moving back to the 50 in the cloud again. That's certainly possible, or go higher and do it, try to do that. But if we can clear the 200 period in the daily time frame and hold above it, again, we may just start seeing a gap and go. Is this a gap and go, a gap and fill, or a gap and trap? As I keep saying, a gap and go, we could just make our way towards that 50 period in the daily time frame if we can hold above our 200 period in the daily time frame. Bouncing off the 50 period and then bouncing right here off the cloud as well, and then getting above the cloud, tried to get above it here, it failed, and then now we're holding above the cloud. So we'll be watching this gap closely here this trading week. The 60-minute chart here. Video up 3.5%, or 3.15%, I'm sorry. Stochastic trying to turn up here. We'll see what happens. This is a weekly chart. MACD is in negative territory, but the diversions did play out in giving us a sell-off. You have a possible bull flag. I think NVIDIA's topped, but again, this is doing the same thing Bitcoin's doing. A bull flag. Again, got a nice looking channel here. If we bounce right here off of this level when it holds, got a nice looking channel there, but we've turned off major resistance in a longer term channel in the weekly time frame, as I've talked about at great length of detail up at the highs up here. If NVIDIA can end up breaking out and either going back to this area or trying to bust up through it, then you have possibly a larger channel expanding of previous channel I've marked here into a larger channel. If we could see NVIDIA get a massive rally, we'll see what happens. MicroStrategy, or I guess it's called strategy now, doing the same thing like Bitcoin and like NVIDIA. They're forming bull flags and potential trend lines. This trend line goes back to the 2022 low, but we're hitting this level, slightly excluding this low. I've drawn this trend line, okay, but if you just connect this point and this point right here, then you've got a possible parallel channel that's expanding. Food for thought, something to pay attention to, because if NVIDIA does participate and we get a big rally, then that could help NASDAQ. A lot of times, though, the leadership doesn't participate at the end of a bull market, and you get other stocks stepping up to the plate. whether NVIDIA makes new highs or not, be watching this bull flag very closely. So NASDAQ, again, we gapped higher. We're moving here up. I talked about these gaps filling right here. Here we are. We're up here at the gap fill area. We now have this gap to be watching. Same thing as the S&P. Again, the 50 period getting back above the cloud. And again, the bullish diversions played out and we broke out of the channel. So now what happens? We filled the gap. Do we keep going to the 200? Do we have another gap up here? Do we keep going towards that area and get this kind of follow through move with NASDAQ and S&P? We'll see what happens with that. Or do we come back and try to fill the gap here from today's gap higher? Again, always watch a gap. Is it a gap and go, gap and fill, or gap and trap? 60-minute chart of NASDAQ and getting back above that 50 period moving average. And if we can build upon this and we can go back and test the highs, then this scenario has possibilities. We'll be watching. Again, can we see the MACD firm up on NASDAQ weekly chart? Can we see the RSI get back above 50 and reaffirm the 50-50 bullish signal? With the S&P, it's getting back above the 50 period. We closed just right at that level, just slightly higher above it. We're now building upon that as we start the week off. We'll see. Do we end up having our low from just over 2 weeks ago hold here on the 13th? There on March 13th, we hit this low. We got the bottoming tail for that week. I told you that very week. We started off the week with a lot of volatility. I told you when if we ended up the week with the bottoming tail and we ended up with the positive, a stronger close and rally by the end of the week, and we ended up seeing that happen. And again, you've got a possible channel within the channel. Could we be headed up for the final blow off top? And again, we're being told there's no possible way that's going to happen. Can the stochastic try to turn back up? Can the MACD firm back up? Can the RSI get back above 50? We're seeing the price of Bitcoin with the breakout above the 200 getting back above the 50 level on the RSI in the weekly time frame to start the week off. I told you, these highs over here, not the highs over here, but these highs right here might be pointing to the next high. Could be. That's the way it's happened in 2000. The 2000 top, whereas it was more of these highs over here were pointing to the next high in 2007. These highs over here, these highs before this peak, could be pointing to the next high. After a 10% drop, could we rally up? And go 20% higher? I've marked that over here, and that could take us up to this trend line right here. And could we do that? Could we be getting this 5-leg push higher for the final phase of the blow off top? I think that's very, very likely. Again, there might be more work to be done over here, but if our low can hold, dropping 10.5% could be followed by a 20% rally, maybe 20 plus percent, and then it's going to be followed by a 20% decline once we do peak out. This is what I think is likely going to be the case. Again, whether we bottomed or not, we'll need to see more signals turn bullish. We'll need to hold above the 200, but if we can get above it, you're on your way to that 50 period. And maybe we see what we had happen in 2000 and 2001, or 2000 and 2007, where we go up to the 50 and then we pull back. Maybe that gives us the wave 2. Maybe we got a 1-2 and then we go off to the races, 3-4. And again, it could be very, very quickly. This could take us into April and May, possibly longer into the summer.